interesting job today. This is something that some of my friends got a hold of me about. They had found an article about this particular kind of thing, and got a hold of me, and I looked at the article and talked to them about it and did some research, and I think we can do it. It's kind of neat. It's putting drawers in where your kick is. You know, your kick is that little recessed area under your cabinet so that your toes fit, you know, so that you can get right up against the cabinet. If you need space badly, or if you just want space there, that's something to consider. So that's what we're looking at today. I have two bays, let's just call them bays, open spaces. 22 3/4 big width and 16 3/4 deep. So the drawers will slide out this way. Okay. Instead of using a 3/4 inch board to hang this, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch plywood to hang it. That saves me quite a bit of room. Saves me roughly an inch of space. And I need that because my minimum drawer, the ideal minimum is 13 inches by 18 3/4. We want to get it as much as we can there. So what I did was I took these original measurements, came up with the stuff that we were going to use, and I've got this drawing. So what this drawing is basically a top view. I'm looking down at the base. The base is this perimeter thing with the little dots in it. Then there's a strip of wood, and then there's my drawer hanger over here, and over here a strip of wood and a door hanger. So 21 3/8 by 16 1/4. Now there are a couple little shims, or actually probably little construction pads that are put in these cabinets, and you'll find this kind of stuff in the cabinets you're working on. You'll find just different pieces, structures, you know, things that support the cabinet, and that's how these cabinets are supported. They have, or there's one of the ways they're supported is these little shims in here, little blocks actually. So I'm not going to try to take those out. They can be glued in, so I'll work around them, calling them 1/2 inch deep. I think they're actually a bit thinner than that, but that gives me a little play. So 16 1/4 deep by 21 3/8. So typically a drawer, an interior of a drawer will look kind of like this. So that would be the vertical piece of the wood. And here's the bottom of the drawer, and it runs, you know, for whatever. And it goes into the other side that looks like this. And then the front is the same way. There's a groove, there's a little notch all the way around that this little piece just sets in. And then a lot of people don't glue these, they leave them open, and they actually leave a little bit of space in here so that things can expand and contract. And it's not a bad plan, because moisture will change, your wood will change, you know, if you get a lot of moisture, humidity, whatever. In our case, what I want to do is something a little different, and it works pretty well. I've done it in the past. I want to build my sides like this and just notch my sides like this, and then glue in my 1/4 inch piece on the bottom of that notch, and then go up like so. So I'll basically cut my pieces out to fit, and then I'll run 2 cuts on the edges, and I'll make that notch on all the pieces, and then I'll fit this board, this piece of plywood, into these notches, and I'll screw it, and I'll probably use brad nails to hold it together. Actually, I'll glue it and probably use brad nails. I don't think I'll use screws. I don't think I'll need to, but that should create a very strong box. Then I have put my awesome piece of plywood on my table, and I'm getting ready to cut some sections of it off. I'm cutting some bigger sections off. I'm not getting precise yet, but I'm getting them within about 1/2 inch. That will allow me to clean them up on the table saw. So I made a mark right there. Right now I've got the tripod setting on a piece I'm going to cut, and I just want to show you what I've done. So I measured 20 1/2, and just look at my measurement, and right in the middle is about where it needs to be. Measuring is a very difficult thing to do properly, but it's pretty important. Now I have this piece of wood that I keep with this saw made out of this awesome material again. But this is a little cheat sheet. You may notice that there is a saw cut right there, and then there's a line right here. What I do is I line my saw cut up with this line, and I'm lining my saw cut up on the outside of this line, and I'm just going to make a mark here. That's where I'm going to put my straight edge. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing over here. And by the way, I've made two of these, one on this side and one on this side, because sometimes you need to, well, you'll find out, like right here. Now I'm doing the same thing. Yeah, here we go. So, and you can see that where my cut is, I just made two little, maybe you can see that, two little pencil marks that represent the edge of the saw blade. So if I line this mark up with the outside edge of this mark, I can mark this here. So, yeah, did you see that? You bet you did. So now that I've done that, let me move this over. Okay. Grab my straight edge. Okay, straight edge. Clips. Now I'm showing this to you because maybe a lot of you don't have a large shop. Like I don't have a large shop. So because I don't have a large shop, I can't really put a giant cabinet saw in here. But you know what? You don't need a giant cabinet saw to do good work. You just need good measurements to do good work and the ability to follow your measurements. So here's how I do it, and it works for me pretty much every time. I'm not sure what you're seeing, but let's back this out. Yeah, okay, so there's my two marks, my initial mark, and then my reference, and then the same over on this side. So let me put this here. And hopefully I won't knock this down. Okay, I could have set that a tiny bit deeper, but I'll fix that with the... So anyway, so there's a basic way to make a really precision cut. That cut isn't perfect, but it's close. It's also a little bit large, but it gets me started. I did that with just a few little odds and ends. I didn't hurt my table. I'll show you. I didn't hurt my table. My only issue is that I have these little fuzzies that I'm going to have to sand off. That's not a big deal. And I really don't mind making my cut just a little deep. I usually try to make it a tiny bit deep, but that worked out pretty well. So there you go. There's a way to cut things without having a table saw. And by the way, I have much longer lengths of these straight edges. I have some that are 10 feet long. So I can make long cuts too, but you know, whatever works. So I'm cutting this piece out. So it'll be 4 7/8 inches high. I'll probably make it a bit smaller, but I'll cut it out to my rough measurements, go back and double, verify my measurements, and then I'll fine cut it. But I'll get it rough cut for now. So 4 7/8 is my rough cut. 4 7/8 by something, so I'm going to cut 2 at 5. So I'm going to cut a 10-inch wide piece is what I'm going to cut off of it. So a 10-inch by 48-inch piece will be what I use to cut these 4 pieces out. And I've turned this over. I sanded the edge because I had all those little things on it. You can see someone's been walking on this, and apparently they like Adidas. So it's kind of cool. I can't even see that. I don't know, maybe you can't see that. Maybe you can. Yeah, there we go. There's the Adidas. So here, 21 3/8, we're going to go 16 1/4, and that is our outside dimensions. So we know that if I want to do something like this, which I do, the reason that I want to do this is because it gives me a larger area, surface area to glue. It allows me to, when I push these together, they square up. They square up in every way, and I really like that. So this is why I want to do this. I want to make this kind of a fitting. So if I do that, I'm going to cut roughly 3/8 of an inch notch by 3/4 in this piece. So I'll have an extra 3/4. If I add the 3/8 and the 3/8 here, that's an extra 3/4 to this piece. If I take that 3/4 off 16 1/4, this piece becomes 15 1/2. So we're looking pretty good here. I have long side, short side, bottoms, rail hangers, a little bit of scrap, which I'll take out of here, and I'll take that scrap out of here, those two pieces there, and the hardware. So we're getting started here. I just adjusted my table saw. Let me show you what I did here. Just making sure that this fence is completely square. Yeah, there we go. It looks really good. Okay. So I'm going to run these through. I'm just going to make sure that they're square against this fence. And I'm just going to run all of these through just to make sure that the lengths are the same. So I've got my vacuum cleaner. So I'm basically turning my saw into a jointer right now by giving it a really long straight edge. There we go. And you need a long straight edge to do this because you want the full length of the board to stay in contact with the fence from the beginning of the cut to the end of the cut. So let's give that a try. We're going to do this. Cut. Are we good? So what I need to do now is notch my long pieces 3/8 in and 3/4 deep. Let me make sure that that's 3/4 deep. Oh yeah, by the way, I've got a lot of tape measures around here, and I have found that when I start a project, I started it with this tape measure. I'm going to continue this project with this tape measure. I'm not going to use another tape measure throughout the entire project. When you start working close in it becomes a big deal to use the same tape measure just because of the little differences between tape measures. Now, if you have two and you know that they're good, you can do okay. But I do have tape measures that do measure differently. The issue is that even though my ultimate measurement may not be perfect, depending on how my tape measure reads, if I do all my measurements with this tape measure, my proportions ought to be proper and ought to fit with my other measurements as long as I do a proper measurement. So another thing to keep in mind, so now that I have this done, I'm able to make my measurements, which I won't do right now, but I'll hold this together and then I'll make my measurements, and that's where this bottom will set in, recessed just a little bit. Anyway, there we go, something like that. So, got that balanced nicely. But anyway, and I'll glue that in and I'll brad nail that together so that it'll be a really strong, square, straight assembly. Like the edge of the drill. Now the reason that I'm drilling from this side, I'm not drilling over here like that, is because I can't see the back side of the drill bit. I can't see where it's actually coming down. But I can here, although I have to sight it both ways to do it. Just make sure that I'm inside my line just a little bit. That was successful. Okay, so I'm set up here. I want to use a jigsaw. So I'm just setting my piece of work lightly clamped, just a couple clamps to hold it. It's really sort of movable. Still, these clamps are losing their power, but it's good, it's decent. I don't really need to clamp it all that tight. So putting my hearing protection on, obviously I have my safety glasses. Now I just want to cut this out. Jigsaws are notoriously bad about cutting plumb, like a 90-degree cut. The grain of the wood will influence the way this blade goes. It'll go anywhere. These are quite annoying to use as far as precision goes. I have used a Bosch jigsaw that was really incredibly good. This one should be, it's the same design, but it's not very accurate. Anyway, I'll carefully do this. So let's get going. I'm now wiping every joint that's going to be glued with just a little bit of water, like a little bit of water. Get this set up. Okay, I've wiped these. They look pretty good. All right. So let me put a little bit of glue in here. I set this like this because the glue was setting and I wanted these to be flat, and they were just a little bit tippy. You know what I mean by that? They were a little bit twisted, not much at all, but I don't want them twisted at all. So this is a way, well, this was my way of trying to eliminate that twist. But as you can see, in the line I have right here, that's nice and square. Nice and square, so awesome. I'm going to do a good sanding on these. That's really what I want to do next. Okay, before I sand these, I thought it might be good to show you why I'm sanding these. You notice I have some glue here. I got black, I just have dirty stuff here. Assembly, yuck, gunk. I've got glue in there, and I have places where the wood is a little bit, you know, where the edges didn't match up perfectly. So that's mainly why I'm sanding these. I want these tops to be nice. I haven't decided whether I'm going to use a router on these or leave these squared. But I am not going to finish these because the lady that I'm doing this for, actually the couple that I'm doing this for, the lady is a really good refinisher, and I would think she might have more ideas about how she wants to do that. But anyway, that's just, you can see I just have junk, dirt, a little bit uneven, just some uneven edges that I want to finish, make it a little bit prettier. And I might get rid of that footprint, I don't know. 22 3/4 big is what I'm shooting for. Those are the holes I've got. Let's see what I'm looking at here. 22 3/4 big, exactly. That is pretty nice. While the camera was off, I dropped this drill and broke that bit and cussed. It was quite annoying. So here we go. Here's our deal. Did you catch that? Did I have this lined up? Of course not. So anyway, I've just put 2 screws in the cabinet. I put 2 screws in these backing pieces, which, by the way, I'll take a grinder and cut those screws off. So anyway, so there's the deal. Put it back in. It sucks in. I like that. And plus, I can just pick it up like this. So it seems to be fitting. I did cut this down to 16, and we're 16 1/4. So I have a 1/2 inch clearance here to work with. And I believe that I set things up properly. The way that I showed you how I was just setting it up to make sure that I'd have a 1/4 inch play. Well, the way that I did it, if I have any issues, I can take the back screw out and I can tilt it, tip it, you know. Are we there? Yeah. So I can take this back screw out, this on the end of this piece, and I can just like tip the whole thing forward and backward. But anyway, that's one of our pieces. So I'm okay with that, y'all. I want to show you what I mean about this adjustment, because this is going to be one of those things that's going to be a pain. I just know it. You know, when you're doing this, when I'm doing this, when anyone's doing this, because you're not going to know what the floor is going to be like till you get there. So you can pre drill and all you want, but so what I'm trying to do is I've put this screw in, and what I've got now is I'm able to pivot this. Notice how I can pick that up. Well, I push down on this. It's still sitting on its shim, right? I guess I better take a look at what I'm showing you. Still sitting on a shim, that's why I can sort of stick my fingernail underneath here. But if I lever down on this side, I pick that side up. So there's what I mean by an axle. So if I need to adjust this higher, I can push this down and put a screw in. I've got a couple different holes that I can use. So if I mess my first hole up, I can use my second hole, and I'm talking about these holes here. There's also a hole here that I'll get later, but for now I'm just going to put the two screws in here. I already held this down and I drilled my hole right here. But I just wanted to show you how that works. So anyway, I'll just go ahead and, well, I got this here, zoom it in, and I'll probably get right in the way of what I'm doing. But anyway, that's the idea, and that's the way that you can adjust the height. And you can also completely detach this and move this up or down, wherever you want to put it. I'm just trying to keep it as low as possible. So there we go. That is, yeah. Here we go. Well, I believe these are ready to go over and fit. I have to do work on the cabinet to put these in. But I think our dimensions are pretty decent. The measurements are good. But who knows? May have to take things apart and trim and cut, and who knows? This 3.5 inches is pretty close to what you're going to find in most kicks. It just depends on what it's built with and how much stuff is there. Some kicks are going to have a lot of things in there, you know, supporting things or weird construction. And some kicks are going to just be probably very void of anything. So you never know what you're going to find when you're... And especially when you're doing surgery on something that's in place where you're cutting the front off and looking at it. I mean, you don't know what you're going to find. That could be crazy. Luckily, I know what to find here because it's an island. We tipped it up and looked at it. Anyway, okay. Later. So I did a couple more things. I put a panel in here that I just screwed in. That way I can unscrew it when I want to do a, you know, cut this out, because my intention is to draw a template, you know, is to clip the front, whatever the front's going to be, to this piece, take this piece off and draw an outline. That'll give me a place to start with my cutting. So I did that on both of these. I also, you may notice I've got 4 holes high and 4 holes low. See right across there. I did that on each one of these, just pre-drilled with 1/8 of an inch drill bit, so that I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that in the field. So this is the area where these are going to go, and I have, you can see it's about 1/2 inch particle board faced with something. Okay, so this is stiffening this sideboard, which you can see is a little bit less than 1/2 inch. So putting in several screws, I could add 2 more screws in here. We'll stiffen that side, make it quite a bit sturdier, considering that this kick has been taken out. Same over here, and this is how these put in place. You notice these shims here, which were in my drawing, and this is one installed. So that's what it looks like. I went ahead and took these little backers off so that these could open, but you can see that they open up pretty nicely. My customers seem to be pretty satisfied. They're giving me cookie dough, so that's a really cool thing. Yeah, so anyway, that's good. We're moving along here, and there we go. What I did with the piece that I cut out was I clipped it back on to the drawer front, and I've labeled these left or right, and I've drawn an outline of the areas that I need to cut. I'll actually cut this top down and raise this up, and then when I cut this, I'll leave a little bit of a lip here, that way there's a handle there. So that kind of completes the field work for now. This is just where I left it the day that I installed the boxes. So, and I've had some time to think about this. Now, my intention was to put this original kick back on, but here's the thing. You saw how I took this off. If I put this back on the drawer, it is basically the same width as the drawer. The drawer sits recessed, but I don't like the way it sets. It's bothering me. And on top of that, where I need to cut this, I've got brads, these nasty little brads, and I have some here. They're actually a little bit higher. But I really don't want to run my saw through this. So I have decided that I'm going to just go ahead and build some drawer fronts that don't look like crap, because these are not going to look that good. I can make them look okay, but still, they're cheap. They're cheap, and stupid particle board. I get it, particle board is a uniform, dense material, but I'd rather build with something else. So we're going to go a step up from particle board. We're not going to go for hardwood, but we're going to do some hardwood plywood. This is some maple plywood. Brought a little piece of it out, and we're going to use this maple plywood. Now, the plywood's going to be nice because one of the things about the plywood is it's 3/4 of an inch thick. That gives me a lot of material to put a screw into. And what I want to do is I want to put screws in from the back and screw the drawer front down from the back. Putting a screw into this stuff, you can do it. It's not the worst stuff in the world, but it's definitely not good. There's just everything poor. Not almost everything bad, but everything. There's more negatives than positives about using this stuff. And putting a screw in it and having it hold over time is one of those negatives. Plywood is quite a bit different. It holds quite a lot better. So, and the issue, and the point is that I have a little bit more of it also. But if you think about the way plywood's built, it's got overlapping layers that are not parallel. So there's a lot of strength in it to hold a screw. Anyway, that's what I will do. And to that end, I also have a little bit of maple tape. By the way, that's maple hardwood. And so this is laminate. I figured out my measurements, which are going to be 23.5 wide. That actually gives me overlap on the drawer by 3 3/8 tall. So here's my first thing to do. And I need to find a tape measure. Okay. Okay, so I've got a couple of nice drawer fronts now, drawer pieces to work with. So I'm trying to make sure that these holes are as parallel as I can get them. So what I did was I put on my little machine vise a piece of metal that I can use as a stop, and I slid this over, made my cut, or made my drill, looked at it both directions. Well, I actually looked at it in this direction to make sure that it was lined up. Then moved it and did the same thing. The point of it is that it's as accurate as I can get it. And I did the same thing to this one. So these are some pretty accurate holes for how I had to do them. This worked out pretty good, other than my first cut, where it was just really ripping it up pretty badly. A good note to keep in mind: always pull your plugs out of your saws before you put them up, because if you don't, well, then you have to when you're doing it, and it will annoy you that you didn't do it, because it will mess with your workflow the next time you're using one of these saws. I found a nice fat blade. We'll see how it's going to work here. I also want to dial my speed down. Okay, that's not too bad. Well, there we go. Here's one with the edges taped. This has been sanded down. When I say sanded, I always say sanded down. I guess that does make sense. This is the inside. This is just knocking that edge over just a little bit. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be machine perfect. I mean, this is the front, right? So that looks pretty good for, well, where's the other piece? So it would have been something made out of this versus this, which is wider, which will allow the drawer fronts to cover the edges and actually set flush. These two pieces will set flush and look quite a bit nicer. And I think that they're going to be better. They'll stick better as far as, you know, like I've talked about, the screws go into the plywood much better than into particle board. I don't have to try to cut these or round these holes off or whatever. But it's getting late and I need to have some food. So I think I'm going to take a break, and maybe I'll come down here later and finish taping the edges and sanding these pieces. I really would like to get them stained, get them dark. They need to be pretty dark. That wood was pretty dark. You know, chocolate brown to, well, I guess I do have a sample of it. But I think the cabinets, the doors are actually a bit darker, a bit nicer looking than that. Quick look at what I got going on here. This is aniline dye, water-based. I'm able to just sort of lay it in and increase its layer. Now this is a more brown color, that's a more red color. But let this dry. So this is what we got. I put a little black. That's some black aniline dye. It's an alcohol base. This is a water-based brown that I put on here. So this is what I got. They're a little darker than this, about close to the cabinets. Anyway, I'm going to spray this down and lock this. You need to spray aniline dye. If you don't spray it, it has a tendency to float, or you can actually wipe it off. So it's good to spray it down. Even when you spray it down, sometimes the dye will float on top of your spray, so you just have to watch it. But I like it. It's nice stuff. Anyway, I'm going to spray this. Okay, so I just finished spraying this. My spray was really, it's water-based polyurethane. There's something wrong with the nozzle. It's this stuff. The last time I used this stuff, I ended up with some bad situations. I don't know that I'm blaming it on that, but it was that brand I was having an issue with. Although, come to think of it, yeah, it was that brand I was having an issue with. So I don't have a lot of good luck with that particular brand right now, but I have done quite a bit of work with it. I do like Cabot, and I actually may go buy some. So I had to wet down a foam brush and then carefully glide it over the top, because as I was spraying it, it was just leaving a lumpy, bumpy mass. It was really not very good. And because I had to brush it, I actually added just a little bit of a grain look to the finish. It doesn't really need it, it's already there. It doesn't hurt anything though, but that will help hold the aniline dye down, and I'll build it up quite a bit more than what it is before I sand it one time, because like I've said, the aniline dye will float up on top of the surface of this. It's weird stuff, but I like using it. You just have to be aware of what it will do. It's kind of interesting stuff. Okay, so I let the first coat dry. It looked like hell, but this is the second coat. I'm using some Minox polyacrylic water-based finish. So far it's going on pretty good. You may notice, I don't know whether or not the camera will catch this, but we'll see if it will. There are a lot of what looks like bubbles in that. Some of those are bubbles, but a lot of that is raised wood grain that's just poking up through the surface. Don't sand it. I would say for maybe 4 coats, don't sand it. Put 4 coats on. They could even be relatively thick. I like the water-based polyurethane on cabinetry. I like the oil-based polyurethane on guitar bodies. So for some reason, water-based polyurethane, I haven't had good luck with it on the guitar, but I've had pretty good luck with it on cabinetry. So why is that? I really don't know. Anyway, I'm just grabbing a couple drips. Yeah, I am making sure to get all the edges. I did turn these over and I coated the bottoms. I made sure to coat everywhere where there's a seam. What I mean by seam is every corner is a seam on this, because I've wrapped it with a laminate tape. So I want to make sure that that seam is covered and filled, and that will make these safe. And what I mean by safe is you won't get stickers from them. So this is a second coat. We'll see how long it takes to dry. If this is like most water-based polyurethanes, it should be an hour or 2. This is a little bit before midnight. I was able to get one more coat on. So this is good. I've got 4 brushed coats on these. Down here early morning. Well, okay, about 11 anyway. Pretty damned early. So this is set overnight. This is 4 coats, no sanding. One of these is a little bit rougher than the other. I'm not sure why, but that's okay. This one is the one that's a little bit rougher. You can even see it. It has more things. There's a sharp little thing, little stickers there. So what I want to do is do a sanding. I just want to knock the high points down, and I'm going to try not to go too far. I just want to knock the high points down. That's really what I want to do. It's easy to go too far. Now for this purposes, if you've watched my other videos, and at this point I don't know if you'll even, I don't know if this video is even going to be around because I have been throttled down, but I'll still continue posting videos. This is a little sander that I made, and it's a piece of 16th inch acrylic and a couple of screws holding it into a piece of wood. And then I have a little stainless spring clip that holds the sandpaper in place. And this little piece of plastic is over that clip. That keeps me from sanding my fingers away when I'm holding this and I move it. If I don't have this little piece of plastic on here, I actually end up sanding my fingers. So that's not a good thing. But this is a pretty nice little sander, and I'll use some water, and we are going to sand this thing. And I'll go ahead and run this. If you've never seen someone do wet sanding, that's what I'm doing now. It's a really good way to sand. It's not that important that you wet sand, but it does make the sandpaper last a lot better, and I think you get a smoother finish. And I like using this little sander because it's completely flat. Or it's very flat, maybe I should put it that way. And it will allow me to knock the high spots down, leaving the low spots. Ideally, you want to knock all your high spots down, and you can see as you're knocking it down, you'll sort of see the progression from these little points to bigger spots to eventually these will just be flat, and that's where you want them. And I have no idea how many coats it's going to take to get them flat. But the more that I'm yakking and pointing this camera at these and not sanding, the longer time it's going to take. So just get your sander a little bit wet. Edges are always important to be careful of. And I may knock some of my dye out of here. I just have to be really careful. So there's a let me see if I can show this to you. Now, I'm not sure if we're focusing. I'll see if I can get this to work. But you can see now that it's got a bit of a dull finish. Those little sharp points are gone, and that's what we're going for, is something like that. And I really don't want to go much further than that for my first sanding. It doesn't take much to burn through. Probably, let me go one more time, just carefully, making sure that I've got the edges. The edges are always very, very susceptible. Okay, that's good. Okay, so there we go. That actually looks pretty good. That is pretty much where you want to leave it. There's still high and low spots, but it's a lot smoother. You know, I can't really, I don't suppose that translates into video, but it's quite a bit smoother. Now, I also want to get the top very carefully and get the sides very carefully. And then this one's ready to coat again. See that it's quite a bit glossier. And this is satin, by the way, but there's less bumps and lumps in it. It'll dry. It's gonna look, I don't know, we'll see. Anyway, that's a pretty good coat. So let it dry. This is the 7th coat. So I've did the 4, yeah, and then the 3 after the sanding. So this is my 3rd coat after the sanding. They're starting to look pretty good. And this is 8 coats dried. I'm gonna try to do a complete sanding. Okay, so here's a little tip. If you're wet sanding water-based polyurethane and you start to see grayer spots in there, bluish grayish spots and dots and just different things like this. This happened when I was sanding the top of this. The extra water was running over the side and streaking that. When you see that, that just means that the polyurethane hasn't cured, and that will go away. All these little spots, there's a dot and a dot in these vertical lines, that will go away once it's dry. It's just that until it cures to a certain point, it will absorb water back into it. It's kind of weird that way. I'm going to let it set probably a half an hour or so, maybe a little bit longer, though, before I coat it again and give it a chance to let some of that moisture come out of there. Nothing like doing finish work, actually doing finishing work, staining and painting, to make a video really drawn out and long, but I'll try to cut it pretty short. This is the 9th coat. Now, I believe that my brush marks will smooth out pretty nicely, but you can see they already look pretty good all the way across there. These have sat for, I believe, 4 days without me doing anything to them. That's a pretty nice finish, although there are some surface blemishes, little spots on these. It's still a really nice finish. I'm going to start with this 320, and I'm not going to use my flat sander because I really don't want to break through the top coat. So let's see how this works. There we go. I'm going to call that good. I think that we're in good shape here. I left a little bit on top here. I didn't do the sides at all, or the ends at all, but I'm thinking we're okay. I could probably back this lens and back it up. There we go, I'm going to back it up. Go like that and let you take a look at that. That's pretty good. I like that finish. I think that's about right for their cabinets. It's a real nice satin finish. The top looks pretty good. Yeah, I'm okay with that. These are the kick cabinets, and they're completed. They look pretty good. Using the drawer fronts that I just built, make them look really decent. And how cool is that? I like that. And then if you look down on this particular blank behind the hole, you can see a green cross, which means there's high quality Russian birch plywood So I think that's pretty cool. But anyway, we also used the little laminate strips to finish the ends of that trim, and also finish this rough edge, and also finish, you might not be able to see this one, the rough edge in between here. So everything is finished, looks nice. The drawers are working well. And on top of that, I put a brace in underneath here where you can't see, but I did, the evidence of that are these 3 screws, which are, I countersunk, but that holds a brace in here just to make the top of this a little bit stronger. So, oh yeah, there we go. So you can see that in there. That light is pretty handy. Yeah. So, that's it. So I guess if you want to build a set of these, you can see just how easy it was, or how hard it was. Anyway, all right. Till next time.